I'm basically on this panel because right now I'm the senior editor at In These Times, and I guest edited our latest issue, which is dedicated to charting a progressive Middle East policy. And the idea was, and I think that's the thinking behind why we decided to do this issue, and I think the ideas that still are important to all of us, be it bloggers or progressive activists, is that we wanted to go beyond. What we do really well as progressives is we're very good at critiquing Bush policies, or existing policies, or even past Cold War policies. And we've also been very good in advocating specific actions. So policy actions, so whether it is to get out of Iraq, whether pressure not to bomb Iran. So we're very good at advocating specific actions, but we strongly felt that there is a huge need for us to go beyond that and think in terms of a Middle East policy, which actually requires us to think about what the United States is, what is its place in the world, and how does our view of that then impact what our role should be in this region, right? So what we wanted to do is what I think is really important for progressives to start thinking. Think in very concrete terms, pragmatic terms, not as in, for us, pragmatic becomes a real code for, compromise, expediency. Pragmatic in the sense of rooted in reality, the situation as it is on the ground, and what is or is not possible, to see our options in a clear-eyed way. And at the same time, within the context of a broader vision, where we are not just going from advocating policy actions for the next 6 months, okay, we should do this in the next 6 months, or we should do this tomorrow, or the next year, without knowing where we want to be 5 years, 10 years from now. What are we trying to do? And so within that context, what we did was we had two pieces, but I'm going to talk about one of them, which is we put together a round table. And usually it's traditional in these round tables to just have, Americans, but we decided to we had two Americans, Brian Katulis from the Center for American Progress, who's also been in the Clinton administration. So someone who really knows how foreign policy works, how it's made in Washington. We also had Joel Benin, who is a Stanford professor, who's incredibly progressive, is very strong on Israel-Palestine. But we also had Yazid Sa'i from King's College, London, who's in Lebanon right now, and Rosemary Hollis from Chatham House, which is the leading think tank in Britain. Because we really thought that if you're going to talk about US foreign policy, maybe we should be talking to people outside as to what they think US foreign policy should be or how it would be effective. And basically, I'm not going to get into all the details, but what comes out of it is a series of, policy recommendations, which are very interesting. Some of them are predictable, a more balanced approach to Israel-Palestine, learning to differentiate between Islamic fundamentalism as a political ideology and the use of terror as a weapon. So which means Hamas is not the Hezbollah, is not Al-Qaeda, is not, the Taliban. And basically trying to figure out then who are we going to talk to and who we're not going to talk to and how our values play into that. But what also I think the roundtable was, for me, was personally valuable is because it really outlined how difficult the situation is. That it's all very easy to say we ought to do this and we ought to do that, but actually, even as we speak, the situation is deteriorating to the point that we might actually have to accept that we can't do as much, that there are limits to our power. And so I'm just going to just read the last part, like how this round table ends, when everyone's made their policy recommendations. And so basically I turned to Yazid and I said, well, you get the last word. And this is what he says. And he says, in that case, we've heard all the possible wishes, and I just wish we could all believe that any of them would come true. But I'm just going to add a couple of predictions. One has to do with Iraq and Iran. I really don't see that the United States has any happy options in Iraq. The situation is almost beyond repair. Unless the United States somehow makes an implicit deal with Iran, it's probable that there's not going to be any modicum of stability in Iraq that would allow the United States to pull out without leaving a total mess behind. a mess that would totally and fundamentally discredit and undermine any future prospect for effective US intervention of any type in the region. That's one concern. The second is that when it comes to Israel and Palestine, the current US policy is not going to change in time. I think we are headed toward a real mess in Palestine if Hamas is totally isolated and brought down. This will break the Palestinian government, break the political system, break the local economy, all of which are extremely fragile. And we will be left with a humanitarian crisis on our hands, ironically engineered by US and Western policies. By the end of the Bush presidency, we will not have the Palestinian state we were promised several times. We will not have a peace deal. This is, I think, what the United States will be left with. So in a sense, I think the idea is not beyond leaving Iraq, is to face the fact that we might be left with a Middle East that has at least two failed states in Iraq and maybe in Palestine by the time, even if we win in 2008. And so I think, so part of like what we were trying to do is to start the conversation now about how we're going to do this and do it, how we're going to deal with this as progressives. Because it's going to be our responsibility in the end. I mean, for sure, the Bush administration is not going to deal with it, or the Republicans aren't, and the conservatives aren't. So this is our job, and I hope, and I think we can rise to the challenge, but that's what the challenge is. Thank you.